Hey everybody, welcome to Move to Combat, a Magic the Gathering podcast. I'm James, and here are your hosts, Haley.
Hey guys!
And Kenny.
Hey guys.
What are we talking about today?
Today we are going to be doing our fundamentals episode, and that means that this week we're going to be speaking about evergreen words.
There's a lot more than I thought there were. Before doing research on the subject, it doesn't include just the static words that are on cards. It also includes like the actions that you can take in the game and like random effects that no one really thinks about being an evergreen word.
So when you may say evergreen words, you mean like words that are common in every Magic set that are printed in every Magic set, right?
Yes. To clarify, an evergreen word is a word that will show up in every set. So for example, haste or draw or counter. We're going to be going over all of the evergreen words. You'll see them in every or almost every Magic set printed. Some of the special sets are exceptions, but every new main set that is put into standard will have these words in them.
Yep.
Cool. Want to get started?
First, we should explain how we're going to do this.
Okay.
Yeah.
To be clear, when we go over all of the current evergreen words, we are going to break them down by talking about their reminder text as found on the cards, the comprehensive definition as found in the comprehensive rules, the colors that these cards with these abilities are most commonly found in, how they interact with stuff, what they interact well with, and then we'll have like an example of the card.
The
ability on a card.
We are only going over current evergreen words. We're not going to be talking about
the obsolete ones.
The obsolete ones like Shroud, and please don't make us do phasing.
They have changed. The evergreen words do occasionally change. It's very unlikely. The only particular instances of it usually happening are when we had like the switch from Shroud to Hexproof. So Hexproof became like the new version of Shroud, and that's why Shroud became obsolete, and so you see Hexproof in new sets. So we're only going over the current list of them, the ones that you will see most often.
And as always, if you guys have questions, comments, or anything, just type it in the chat and I will read it live on air if it's constructive and cool.
Alright, so let's jump into it.
Alright, okay.
We're starting off...
Static abilities.
So static abilities, I like the way Haley described it in that they're just there. They just exist. There's not really anything that a player can do about it. Just being there, and they're always happening.
Yeah, the official definition is they do something all the time rather than being activated or triggered, and what that means is they're in a constant state of being. They're always being checked for, so they're constantly happening as the abilities are happening.
What's the phrase? They're state-based, which basically means that they alter the game state without using the stack. They're always happening.
Yep. So a good example, we'll go with Deathtouch, which is the first evergreen word on the list. We're going to go through all of the static abilities first. Deathtouch, the reminder text on it is any amount of damage that this creature deals to a creature is enough to destroy it. It is most commonly found in the colors black and green. Now that doesn't mean it can't be found outside of these colors. These are just the colors that have the most instances of it. It's a keyword ability that causes damage dealt by an object to be especially effective. So, for example, if you're using the example that we have up on the screen, Vampire Champion, it is a 3/3 with Deathtouch. This says it doesn't matter that the power or the toughness of the other creature. If this Vampire Champion gets that 3 damage in, your creature will die.
Period.
With very few exceptions.
As long as it doesn't have some other clause.
Yeah, so Deathtouch will kill it. As long as it can get 1 damage through, the creature will be destroyed. It interacts really well with trample, meaning if you have a creature with Deathtouch and trample, Deathtouch, you are able to deal 1 damage to any blocking creatures, and then the rest of that damage is still able to trample over. We'll talk about trample in a minute, but Deathtouch just needs to deal 1 damage to a creature to kill it in any instance.
Yeah, abilities like First Strike and Double Strike allow a Deathtoucher to hit first before a creature without First Strike or Double Strike can attack. So the Deathtoucher just kills it without having to take any damage.
Correct. So it doesn't, in that instance, if their creature is bigger than yours and you hit it with first strike, if it's dealing at least 1 damage to it, that creature is dying before your creature sees any damage. And then it also works very effectively with menace as well, because you assign damage as you so choose. So Deathtouch. I've got a 3/3 Deathtouch and you're blocking it with 3 creatures. I can assign 1 damage to each of those 3 creatures because 1 damage is lethal.
As long as the Deathtoucher has more than 1 power, menace is really good with the keyword ability.
Correct. All right.
Next we are moving on to Defender. Defender is mostly a white ability because white is the most defensive color. It's a lot of creatures that do something, either when they come into play or have an activated ability attached onto a cheap to play creature with a really big toughness value and no power. So Defender specifically says this creature can't attack, which means it can't attack. You can't attack your opponent with it.
It just sits there as a blocker.
Yeah, it's a wall. But giving it like flying or reach makes it a better wall because it can block creatures with abilities that give it those creatures evasion. And the big toughness value on a small mana cost can be really, really effective sometimes.
Yeah, it's just very good for the scenarios in which you need like something that's typically lower cost. Most defenders you'll find have 0 power, so they're not really killing anything when they're blocking, but they do get around the evasive things like flying. Or if they've got reach, I should say.
Or they generally
they'll help you block that stuff. Or if they've got like a bunch of little creatures swinging in, your 0/4 toughness guy will just eat the hits all day long. He doesn't care.
Yeah. Or like Defender creatures will have like a really cool ability attached to it, like Suspicious Bookcase, which can make a creature you control unblockable.
Yeah. So it's not my favorite ability by any means, because you just have a creature sitting there as a blocker.
You like to punch your opponents as fast as possible.
In standard. But it's a nifty thing, because it just sits there as a wall, and it protects you. And that's all it's meant to do.
Yep.
Next up on the list, we have Double Strike. Double Strike deals both first strike and regular combat damage. So first strike opens up a new step in combat, as we talked about on our last episode of Fundamentals. So it will hit first, and then the double strike will also hit again. It's important to note with this that double strike only hits 1 target, so if it kills the creature on first strike damage, it doesn't hit again because the creature's already dead, so you don't hit like the creature and then the opponent. But if you hit the opponent, you're dealing double the damage, and only the opponent. It deals double the damage. First strike and regular is pretty cool. Yeah. It's most commonly found in red and white. It's pretty cool with like Deathtouch. It works really well with Deathtouch, as we explained earlier, because you're hitting first, so you're killing things most likely. And then it just gives you an extra chance too. So if you've got, for example, we have the Avon Sunstriker in here. It's a 1/1 with flying and double strike. It can easily kill a 2/2.
Yeah.
Because it's dealing that damage twice.
It'll trade with the 2/2.
It'll trade with the 2/2, but it'll kill something with 2 toughness.
Yep.
Okay, next.
Yeah, moving on.
So Enchant's just an ability that was attached to enchantments that attach to either creatures, lands, enchant artifacts, whatever permanent is in play. Basically, it's just you can attach that enchantment to an object or permanent you control, or an opponent controls, or whatever falls under the rules for that card.
So, for example, Arcane Flight on here, it has enchant creature, and it says that enchanted creature gets +1/+1 and has flying.
Yep.
So you will, the reminder text on it says, enchant says it can be attached to an object. In this case, it can be attached to a creature. You put it on that creature. The creature now has that ability. It becomes a part of that creature.
Yep, and you can put it on any creature on the battlefield. It does not have to be a creature you control. If you've got a strategy that includes pumping your opponent's creatures and giving them flying, you can do that. I don't know what strategy that is, but I kind of want to be part of that.
I don't. I don't trust whoever's doing that.
Enchanted effects do target the permanent and go on the stack. so they can be interacted with. So if the permanent in play being targeted by the enchant effect is then out of play when the effect goes to resolve, the enchant effect gets countered, and then the enchantment goes to the graveyard. Because there's nothing to target.
Yeah, and Enchant is one of those abilities too. You'll find it in all 5 colors and potentially in colorless.
No,
it's not colorless.
Yeah, I don't think there are any colorless.
I don't think
enchantments.
there's any colorless enchantments.
I think those are artifacts.
They're all equipment.
Regardless.
Yeah.
And Enchant is a thing that can be found all across all 5 colors. So you're gonna see it all over the place in every color you play. There's not really particularly one that you see it in more than another.
No.
So then next we have First Strike. First Strike is very much like Double Strike, except it doesn't have the second hit. It just hits first. So it deals combat damage before creatures without First Strike, so you're hitting first. Once again, just like Double Strike, it is in the colors red and white most predominantly, and it works really well with Deathtouch or against Deathtouch.
Yeah.
First Strike works really well against Deathtouch because if the Deathtouch creature does not have First Strike,
then it doesn't get
and your
damage.
First Strike will kill the Deathtoucher before it has a chance to deal damage to you, your First Striker will not die via the creature with Deathtouch, which is really cool because who doesn't like ways around Deathtouch?
Deathtouch interacts with a lot of things. Like a lot of things. It's kind of silly.
Yeah, but it's really good to have First Strike to be able to proactively work against the Deathtouch.
It also makes in play it makes the game like combat really difficult for the players that have creatures without First Strike, because it just makes blocks or having to block really hard because they just kind of lose the creature if it were supposed to trade.
Yeah, they have to be very careful when blocking creatures with First Strike, because it does hit first. So, like Kenny said, if it would normally trade, and in this situation,
it just loses,
mine's hitting first, yours just loses, and mine doesn't do anything. Sorry, have a nice day.
So it forces your opponent to have creatures with bigger toughness than the First Striker's power.
Yes. First Strike also works really good against when a lot of the little burn spells like shock, so it's like, I want you to block this, because if you block this, then your creature has a damage, and then I'll be able to shock it.
Also works really well with it.
Yes, it also works really well with it. Because shock is an instant, and you can do that stuff instantly, and it's really cool. But it works really well with that stuff because your First Striker isn't taking damage in most of those scenarios in which your First Striker is bigger. So they can't do the things. It's like, well, I'll just block it and do a little bit of damage to it, or I hope you block this and do a little bit of damage to it so I can kill it, because First Strike just hit first. It didn't take damage as long as it killed.
Yep.
So, next up, we have...
I believe it's Flash.
Yeah.
This is my favorite ability. I really like Flash.
Really good ability.
Basically, it says permanents, which are normally sorcery speed, or sorceries, which are normally sorcery speed, which can only be cast on your main phase without anything else on the stack, can now be cast as an instant, which means you can respond to other things being on the stack by playing something with Flash. We have Aether Meltdown, which is an enchantment that you can play at instant speed to enchant something, and then it gives you 2 energy, and it gives the permanents enchanting -4/-0. So
this is an enchantment that you would probably use against one of your opponent's creatures.
Probably. But you can like respond to your opponent saying, oh, I'm going to attack with this Deathtoucher. Cool, give it -4/-0, block it.
Yes, it is very good to be able to cast everything at instant speed, because then you're playing on your opponent's turn. When you play stuff on your opponent's turn, for example, you're playing creatures on your opponent's turn, well, then you get to your turn, they don't have Summoning Sickness anymore. It also allows you to do stuff where if you can cast all of your stuff at Flash speed or instant speed, it allows you to leave all your mana up and leave your opponent quivering in their boots, because they have absolutely no idea what you're going to do. If you have something, if you have nothing, you just have a bunch of mana open and a handful of cards, and you're like, pass turn. And
yeah,
like,
it makes it really difficult to... If your opponent's playing all their spells at instant speed, it makes it very difficult to play your cards to react to your opponent. You have to play proactively, and if they have answers, then you're just out of luck. And most decks that survive at, specifically with abilities like Flash, are usually playing things that are meant to be proactive reactively. but in a way that kind of throws off the tempo of your opponent.
Yes, and
Flash
like
Gear Hulk.
Yeah, I'm thinking more like Vivienne, 3-mana Vivienne.
Yeah.
That gives all your creatures flash, and then playing creatures with valuable enter the battlefield abilities like Deputy of Detention.
yes, correct.
Yep.
And like all things worth playing, Flash is in blue predominantly.
Of course, because blue's the trickiest color.
Blue is the best color.
I mean, that's why islands are banned, right?
You can
Islands
send
are
our
banned.
hate mail to.
We have a house rule that basic islands are banned because blue is the best and people just can't handle it.
Nope.
Believe it or not, I think black is my favorite color because no matter what combination I use, black's always part of it.
I like multicolor stuff, but with
Back
blue.
back on topic.
Back on
Of,
topic.
of
Back on
the
topic.
evergreen words. Favorite colors is a discussion for another day.
Okay.
Next up, we have flying, and flying is the OG of evasive abilities in Kenny's words.
I wrote that. I will own that.
It pairs really well with abilities like Menace for extra evasion, and to break it down what flying is, it is a keyword ability that restricts how a creature may be blocked. So creatures with flying can't be blocked except by creatures with flying and or reach. It's predominantly found in white and blue. Because, once again, blue is just evasive and tricky, and then white is,
It's all about the keywords.
it's all about the keywords. So, flying is super evasive. We've talked about this before, and it works so well because you can only block it with other things that have flying. So all of your guys on the ground do nothing against flyers. So when you've got big flyers that are flying in the air,
Turns
as
out,
they do,
creatures with flying fly over creatures that don't fly.
exactly. And it sounds
they
really
have
stupid
reach.
breaking
Unless they
it
have
down
reach.
this much.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless they've got reach. And it might sound stupid breaking this down so much, but that's what flying does, is it flies over everything, super evasive,
Yeah.
works well in a lot of decks. You want some sort of flying or things to be able to deal with flying in your deck because it's so evasive, or because you need a defense against that sort of evasiveness.
Yep.
Alright, so, next up.
Haste.
Haste.
So haste just says, I gotta go fast. Basically, the creature can attack or tap.
Alright.
Huh?
We're gonna get in trouble.
No, we're fine.
Demonetized.
We're fine. Basically, the creature can attack or tap at...
We have to be monetized
when it's cast.
first to be demonetized.
Like, can you explain haste?
So if you've got it like a tap ability, you can use it as soon as the creature comes into play. Or if you just want to attack with it, you can do that too.
Basically, it just ignores summoning sickness.
Yeah.
So anything that you would be able to do with a creature the turn after you play it, if it's got haste, you can do it that turn.
I want to say it's actually pretty similar to Flash in the way that it functions. It's still at sorcery speed, but it gets around having to wait a turn to use the creature that you play.
That's true. I wouldn't compare them directly, I don't think. But you're not wrong, yes. When you play something with Flash at the end of one of your opponent's turns, it effectively makes it so on your turn you evade the summoning sickness, whereas a creature with haste just ignores summoning
Just doesn't
sickness.
care.
It's like, "Pfft, summoning sickness? I eat that for breakfast. Please. Who cares about waiting? I gotta go fast." And it's predominantly found in green, red, and black.
Mostly red.
Mostly red, very, very predominantly red, but as you can see with the Charging Warboar, you find it a lot in the multicolors with like the red and the black, and then the black and the red, or
If it's got
red,
red,
the black, and then the green and the red.
if it's got red in it, it might have haste.
It's usually red is the best color for haste, and that's why you see like a lot of mono red aggro decks do specifically well.
Because they don't have to wait. They go fast.
Exactly. Next up, we have Hexproof. Hexproof, once again, in the color that is most worth your time, blue, predominantly. It's also found
In
quite
green
a
and
bit
white.
in green and white. Just out of the numbers, it's a pretty blue ability. So Hexproof says this permanent can't be the target of spells or abilities your opponents control. Meaning your opponent cannot target it. So anything that says target creature that your opponent casts, doesn't hit it.
Target whatever the thing is. That's hexproof.
Target whatever the thing is that's hexproof. Guess what? You can't target it. That's basically what it boils down to. You just can't hit it.
It just stops your opponent from interacting with your creature if it has hexproof.
Yes.
Or your permanent or whatever has it. And the only way they can really do anything against it is either to kill it via combat or use some kind of mass
global
target
effect.
Global effect on it.
Yeah, so if like you give everything on the field -2/-2, or you wipe the board so you destroy all creatures, anything that doesn't directly target it goes around it. However, single spot removal will not be able to hit it.
And the ability does have to specifically say target. If it just says choose a creature, it doesn't care about hexproof.
So, for example, like sacrificing.
Or if you have...
Once again, like more global effects or sacrificing, it goes around stuff. Stuff that doesn't specifically target.
Yes.
If it targets it, if it targets said thing with hexproof, it cannot target said thing with hexproof.
Yep.
That's just how it works. Moving on, we have...
Indestructible, which is in white, and it's our first colorless keyword. Which is cool.
It is found in colorless a lot, specifically with Eldrazi.
There's a lot of artifacts from the Mirrodin blocks that are indestructible in some form or fashion. But basically it says that any damage or destroy effects don't destroy something that has the indestructible ability. It doesn't prevent the damage, and that's important, but it does prevent the damage from destroying the creature. Or permanent or whatever.
Yeah, so something that says destroy it won't destroy it. For example, like if you have a spell that says destroy all creatures, it's not going to get destroyed because it can't be destroyed. It will not be destroyed via combat damage. However, the one thing that does get about indestructible is like -1/-1 counters. Or sacrificing. You can still make them sacrifice something that's indestructible. You can
also
still exile something.
Yep.
Yeah.
As long as you can reduce the creature's toughness to 0, it will still die regardless of whether it having indestructible or not.
Right. So for example, with this wall, if you're able to give it 6 -1/-1 counters, it will die because its toughness cannot reach 0.
Yep.
That's not damage that's being dealt to it. It's not destroying it. You're basically reducing the floor level. So you're pulling the floor out from underneath of it, essentially. So you're making that 6 go down to a 0, and nothing can survive with 0.
Nope.
No matter what. So then we have Lifelink. Lifelink is...
It's really straightforward, guys.
It's really straightforward. A lot of these are. But Lifelink says that damage dealt by this creature also causes you to gain that much life. You deal the damage, you gain the life. It's for example, for the Court Cleric we have there, it's a 1/1 with lifelink, base power and toughness. You deal 1 damage, you gain 1 life. It's predominantly found in white and black. It's super useful because your life is one of your most valuable resources in the game. So you can spend life as you would spend a lot of other things with certain cards, and it's very advantageous. So the more of it you have, the more stuff that you're able to do, or the longer that you're able to draw out the game.
Yep. It also feels really bad to be hit by a creature with lifelink, and then your opponent just gains that much life. It feels like you're taking double damage. It just widens the gap that much more.
It just feels bad. Because, it widens the gap so much more. It's like, I'm going to hit you for 5. You're down to 15, and now I'm at 25. 25 is a lot harder to deal with than 20, especially when you're at 15.
Yeah, that's 10 points.
Yeah. It's just really good. It's probably one of the best abilities in the game because it just elongates.
It extends the game.
It extends the game. Next up, we have Menace,
which is mostly black.
Mostly
there's
black.
some
you see a bit of it in red too.
And green. Basically, it needs to be blocked by 2 or more creatures in order to be blocked. It's an evasion ability like flying, but it's not. I wouldn't say it's as good. I'd say it's close, but
it's just it's good as evasiveness in the fact that they have to have at least 2 creatures to be able to block it in the first place.
Yep. It also allows you to kind of mess with combat math because you can choose which of the 2 creatures is more important to kill if you're going to trade with one of them, or you can spread the damage out if the Menace creature happens to have Deathtouch. You can just say, cool, they both take 1, they die. It's also really cool with Indestructible because it needs to be blocked by 2 or more creatures, so it's likely that it will die in combat if they have 2 creatures to block it. And if it just doesn't die, then you can just pick a creature to kill, and they have to find another creature to block with the first one.
Yeah, if you've got something with Indestructible and Menace, you're probably just picking things off the board one by one, so it's really good. But yeah, Menace is super good with evasive things because they have to be able to keep up a board state and keep building that board state to be able to block this guy with Menace. At the very least, they're probably going to have to trade 2 creatures for 1.
Yep.
Usually, that's how it works. Obviously, when you get to later game, if they've got bigger stuff, your Menace guy doesn't matter as much anymore. But these things happen when you get later in a Magic game.
Yeah, when creatures get bigger, it's hard to get through with evasive creatures like Brawl Bash Ogre, which is just a 3/3 for 4 mana. With Menace.
Typically speaking, Menace is a 2-for-1 trade. Not always, but in an early game, typically speaking, Menace is a 2-for-1 trade. They have to be able to keep up the board state to deal with your Menace guy, and that's what makes it good.
Mm-hmm.
Next up, we have Reach. Reach is a predominantly green ability.
I think it's almost entirely green.
It's almost entirely green.
Because green doesn't fly.
Yes. Out of all of the abilities that fall within, like, mostly one color, this is just, like, 95% of it's in green.
That's because green has spiders, and spiders reach. I don't know. And archers, and a bunch of other weird things, because green's weird.
I don't know why green has it, but...
Well, green doesn't fly, and it needs to balance the game against...
I mean, like, with the creatures, I don't think it matters. Reach just says that it can block creatures with flying. This gives a color that wouldn't normally have a way to deal with this, a way to deal with it.
Yeah. Green doesn't fly. Green reaches.
Yeah, it's one of those things like we talked about earlier. When you've got a creature with flying, normally your guys on the ground wouldn't be able to do anything. If you're playing mono green, you don't have a lot of answers to the guys in the sky. Doesn't matter how big your guys on the ground are. Reach now gives you the ability to go around that evasiveness. Mm-hmm. Next up is...
Trample. This is green's evasive ability. This is their flying with big parentheses on it. Because green's creatures are normally bigger than everyone else's. So they, instead of getting around the blockers, they smash them to pieces and run over them.
Yeah, so trample deals excess combat damage when it's attacking. So normally, if I've got a 5/5 and you have a 1/1, you block my 5/5 with your 1/1, that's the end of damage.
Yeah,
is it just
it's blocked, the damage is done.
That's not how trample works.
Trample allows you to assign whatever damage you need to destroy the creature that's blocking you, and then you can assign the rest to the player or planeswalker that you're attacking.
Yes.
So, like that 1/1, you could assign 1 damage to, and then throw 4 at your opponent.
Yeah, or in the case of the Colossal Dreadmaw, that's a 6/6 with trample. Anything that's smaller than that 6/6, it's killing it, and then you're still taking that extra damage. So, not only is it really big as a 6/6, you have to be able... to make it most effective and most worth your blocking, you're going to have to be able to kill it with 6 power of some sort. And that's not really that great for you to do. Because your guys are probably a little bit smaller than the 6/6. So you're going to have to sack at least, or throw at least 2 guys under the bus to be able to kill that thing.
Yeah. And, trample with Deathtouch turns it into a whole other monster.
Oh, trample with Deathtouch is nasty. Like we said earlier.
You only have to assign 1 point of damage to the creature that's blocking, and then you can just throw the rest at your opponent, right? Only ever 1 damage.
Yeah, so if you've got a Colossal Dreadmaw, that's the 6/6 trample, you somehow have a way to give it Deathtouch, and they block with their 1/1, or they block with a 6/6, and they're like, cool, I'm going to kill your Colossal Dreadmaw, and you go, just kidding, it's got Deathtouch, so I'm going to deal 1 damage to that 6/6 in front of me. It's going to die, and 5 damage is going to trample over to you.
And then the Dreadmaw will die.
The Dreadmaw will die, yes. That should be cleared up. The Dreadmaw will die. However, it died killing a creature and dealing excess damage to a player, which is super effective.
Yeah, it's really good. I consider it an evasion ability. It gets around chump blockers and little guys
Okay, if we're considering evasion getting around chump blockers, then sure, we can call it evasion.
Just getting around blockers.
Getting around blockers, yeah. It's pretty effective at doing so.
Okay.
Next up, Leos.
Vigilance. This is mostly white, but green has some too. Basically, the creature doesn't tap to attack. So, Angel of Dawn is our example. It's just flying, and then when it enters the battlefield, creatures you control get +1/+1 in Vigilance, which means you can attack with all of them, and then keep them back to block, because you can't block with a tapped creature. So, having Vigilance on the creature means you can attack, and then have it attack, and then it protect.
It attacks and protects.
Yes.
Yes.
It also allows you, if a creature with Vigilance has like a tap to pay activated ability cost, you can attack with a creature and then tap the creature to pay the ability cost.
Correct.
So it's this really interesting way to get around resources in the game.
Yeah, somewhat. Yeah, because like you said, so you can attack something with Vigilance, then you can tap it for some sort of ability later on, so you're getting twice the amount of use out of the creature that you would have before. Or alternatively, if you're not using it to pay a cost for something, you can use it to block.
Or you can do both.
Yeah. So that's like super nasty. If somebody like all out swung at you, well then you have your stuff with Vigilance and you all out swing, and now next time they can't all out swing into you because all of your stuff has Vigilance. So it didn't tap when they attack. So now you've got blockers for all of the stuff they want to throw at you as well. It's just really, really good for decks that want to attack. Next up, we're moving on to the one activated ability.
We got some stuff to say about it, though.
There's a lot of stuff to say about this one activated ability. It's an Evergreen ability because you see it in every set, but there's only one of it. An activated ability is defined as an ability that can be activated by a player by paying some sort of cost. Whatever that cost may be, you're doing something to make the ability happen. It's not just being constantly checked like it is with a static ability. Sometimes that comes in the form of tapping something to do something. Sometimes it comes in the form of paying mana. Yeah.
Paying any kind of resource like life or creatures or whatever.
Literally, paying something to do an ability you're doing something to activate the ability. It's an activated ability.
Important to note that activated abilities function like spells in that they use the stack. You say I am going to use my activated ability. It goes on the stack.
Correct. Opponents
can respond to it with anything at instant speed that either they want to do before it resolves or they want to stop it from happening.
Correct.
That's important to know. Activated abilities work like spells. It's just it's a wide term, and there's only like one real keyword that we want to talk about.
Yep. Bring up the keyword, please.
It's equip. This is kind of I think the one big keyword that colorless artifact spells kind of claim.
Yes, more specifically, it's equipment.
Equipment.
It comes on equipment. You equip equipment.
It's like attach or enchant. Sorry, we haven't gone over attach yet. Enchant, in that you attach it to a creature or permanent that it can equip to. It is a sorcery, so you have to do it with nothing else on the stack. And it does use the stack, so if anybody has an ability that counters an ability that an opponent controls, they can say, cool, you paid the mana. No.
Yes.
Also, if the creature that you want to equip it to leaves play while the ability's on the stack, you paid the mana, the ability is countered. Because there's nothing that's equipping to it, and then you have to pay the cost again.
Yes. So...
Also, one more thing, I'm sorry.
No, go for
it does target, so anything that says it can't be targeted by anything, you can't equip to.
Correct. So, anything that can't be targeted, equip will target.
Will not be able to target.
It will not. Yeah, I'm saying equip does target, so anything that cannot be targeted with equip. Also additionally, words. If your opponent gains control of the creature that your equipment is attached to, you still control the equipment and can move it to a creature at the next opportunity.
Yeah, so like on your next main phase, You can be like, cool, that's awesome, you took my creature. I'm going to take this Black Blade Reforged and move the bonuses to another creature I control so you don't get them. They can't do anything about that. They don't control the equipment.
Yes, that is how it works. That is the activated ability, the one singular Evergreen activated ability. Moving on to now the actions. So the actions are a keyword or word, usually a verb that substitutes for a piece of rules text. And you'll kind of see what we mean by that as we go into it. So action is something that you're doing. It's just something that's happening. It's what you're doing. There's not really a way to explain it than to
really,
jump
yeah,
into it.
you just do actions.
Yeah, you just do actions. There's no reminder texts on card for them because they work how they work. So, for example, moving on to the first one.
Yeah, or
it's activate.
Yeah, this is the activated abilities.
Mm-hmm. It's to put an activate says you put an activated ability onto the stack and pay its cost so that it eventually resolve and have that set effect.
Ideally, yeah. Most activated abilities are instant speed. Unless it says otherwise, equipment is the one special one that is specifically sorcery speed. If you're tapping a creature, you can do it whenever you can have the chance to respond to something, or if your opponent's like moving to a different phase, you can say, cool, as you move to the phase, I'm going to do the thing. Like Adapt, for instance, is just 4 mana, Adapt 1, which puts a +1/+1 counter on the creature if it doesn't already have a +1/+1 counter on it.
Yeah, so one of the easiest ways to explain how Activate works is with the activated abilities. So since Adapt is an activated ability, you pay the 4 mana, you've now activated the activated ability. It's just something that you're doing.
Yeah, and then it goes on the stack, and opponents can respond to it as they feel they need to.
Yes, and the next one is...
Attach.
Mm-hmm.
So this is kind of the umbrella term to things that attach to other things. Or things that can, attach to other things.
Yeah, things that
There's
attach
no
to
other
other things.
real way to simplify that.
To move an aura or equipment onto another object is basically what it simplifies to.
Yeah, and attach doesn't specifically target, I believe. So there are some spells and abilities that say attach a thing to a thing, but it doesn't say target, so you're just like, cool, I'm just going to slide this on here now.
It'll say target if it targets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's just kind of the umbrella term for auras, equipments, anything like that.
Yeah. That's just attach. It's the action that you do. Moving on. Cast. Casting is to take a card from where it is, usually from the hand, not limited to just being in your hand, and you put it on the stack and pay its cost so that it will eventually resolve and have its effect.
Yep.
So this is any casting your spells. I want to play this card. Here's my mana for it. May I cast it, please?
And then blue players, Windmill Slam counterspell.
We'll get to that.
But this is kind of the thing that you do to play Magic.
Yeah, and when you cast it, it goes onto the stack.
Yep.
So that it may be responded to.
And you can do this with any card that's not a land. Land has its own term that it kind of falls under because it doesn't use the stack.
Correct. So any spell that essentially you're paying mana to play, you're casting.
Yeah.
Next one is...
To counter.
There we go. There's a counter.
Counters, it cancels a spell or ability so it doesn't resolve. Mm-hmm. So if something's sitting on the stack, and that's where why blue is so powerful, because it can interact with the stack. Just quick segue there. Easily. Basically, you can say, I don't want that ability to resolve. I've got this spell in hand that says I can stop this thing from resolving on the stack. And it basically removes an ability on the stack and stopping it from happening.
Yep, counter is canceling, and you're just saying no to that very specific thing.
Yep.
Next up is create. Create, you'll find it on stuff like this card, Aviation Pioneer, where it says when it enters the battlefield, you create a 1/1 colorless Thopter artifact. To create is to create a token, or to create a token is to put it onto the battlefield.
Yep. This is technically an ability. So and it does use a stack. So if anything says you can counter target ability, you can do so with create.
Yeah, it is an ability. It goes onto the stack, but you're making something.
Yeah.
To create is to make.
Yep. Destroy is the opposite. Basically, you're moving a permanent from the battlefield to its owner's graveyard. But it specifically doesn't work with effects like Indestructible, because Indestructible specifically says it cannot be destroyed.
Yep. Yeah, you're destroying it. It's fairly self-explanatory to what it's doing. For example, cast down is a 2-drop instant, just destroy target non-legendary creature.
Yep, and destroy is always from battlefield to graveyard.
Correct. Destroy just moves it into the graveyard. It doesn't do anything fancy. It just basically says kill you for now.
Yep.
Next is discard. Discard is to move a card from the owner's hand to that player's graveyard. For example, on Nico Bolas the Ravager, it says when he enters the battlefield, each opponent discards a card. So you will have the cards in your hand. If you have to discard a card,
you take one from your hand and
take
put it in
one
your
from
graveyard.
your hand and you put it in your graveyard. It's as simple as that.
It does not trigger anything that cares about destroying, because the card was never on the battlefield.
Therefore, it can't be destroyed.
It cannot be destroyed.
It was
It
never
also
in play officially, so it cannot be destroyed. It's
Yep.
just moving from one zone to another zone.
Yep. Exchange is interesting. It's basically to swap. So you're taking control of one thing and giving an opponent control of another thing.
Not always necessarily. We
Not
should clarify
always.
that. Exchange just means you're swapping one thing for another thing. It doesn't have to be with an opponent. It can be within yourself.
Yes. But normally it has to be able to target, and it uses the stack. It's an ability like any other thing that's not that uses stack unless it specifically says otherwise. But you're swapping, so you're just saying, cool, I want to exchange control of this thing, and then you just swap them.
Yeah, for example, we've got role reversal on here. It says exchange control of 2 target permanents that share a permanent type. So when it says exchange control, it typically means you're swapping with an opponent, but there are cards that say something like, if you, like it's an activated ability that says if you pay this cost, you can change this creature's power for your life total. So you would exchange the number of life you have for the creature's power. So the power becomes the life total becomes the power.
Yep.
Anything that just swaps.
Yep.
Alright, next up is to exile. And exile technically has 2 comprehensive definitions because it means 2 different things within the game. So there's the exile zone. It was previously known as remove from the game. If you ever see a card that says remove this from the game, it means to exile it. Exile is a holding area for cards.
Like a graveyard or a library.
Like a graveyard or a library, but it's separate. So anything that is in the exile zone is more or less removed from the game. And to exile something is to put an object into the exile zone from whatever zone it's currently in. So an exiled card is one that's been put into the exile zone. To simplify, so for example, Vraska's Contempt, it's a 4-drop instant where you exile target creature or planeswalker and you gain 2 life. So that creature or planeswalker is being moved to the exile zone. It is no longer in the game.
Yep. Because it's being exiled, it does not trigger any destroy effects. It doesn't trigger any
It will not hit the
die
graveyard.
effects.
The
It
exile,
never goes to the graveyard, and it cannot be interacted with with cards that interact with the graveyard.
Correct, because it is not the graveyard. Anything that moves to the exile zone does not hit the graveyard because it's going to that separate exile zone.
Yeah, and as of right now, it is a fairly permanent removal.
Exile,
I think there's only like
there are very few cards that interact with the exile zone. So yes, if something is exiled, you, like I said, it used to be known as removed from the game. So if something was exiled, you pretty much just don't see it again for the rest of the game. There's not a lot of ways to interact with something being in exile.
Probably just gone.
It's just gone.
So to fight, fight is mostly red-green. I believe, green with some red in it. Basically, each creature deals damage equal to its power to the other. This dodges abilities like First Strike and Double Strike that care about an extra combat step. because it doesn't use combat steps at all. It does use the stack because it's an ability, but abilities like Deathtouch and Lifelink, which care about, and Indestructible, which care about like how damage interacts with the creature, interact with fighting. So if you have like a Deathtoucher fighting an indestructible creature, the Deathtoucher will most likely die, but the indestructible creature will not. And if you have a Lifelinker fight with something, the Lifelink ability will gain you life because the creature is dealing damage.
Yes. It does specifically said that these two creatures fight are dealing damage. So, like you said, Lifelink, it says, when this deals damage. So it will trigger off of this. Anytime something fights, though, just be aware, like, if you do it before combat, the damage will stay on it because they're dealing damage. So the damage will stay on it until end of turn. So you have to be aware of that when you're going into combat. Also, you have to be aware of it if you're doing it outside of combat, like in your post-combat main phase, because if that creature that you're using to fight had damage dealt to it during combat, it will still have that damage from combat on it, and then it will also take on the additional fight damage.
Yep.
So it's very important to be aware of that. Next up is play. Play is to play a card.
Basically, put a land from your hand or a card from your hand into the battlefield, or a card from your deck or your graveyard or your hand. So
to play a card is to play that card as a land or cast that card as a spell, whichever is appropriate in the instance.
But it can also, you can play cards without casting them.
Correct.
So if something says to play something, like play a instant sorcery card from your library without paying the mana cost. You're not casting it.
You're effectively casting it without paying its mana cost.
Well, yeah.
So that's why it says to cast that card as a spell, whichever is appropriate.
Okay.
So you can still cast a card. It's still considered casting, but you're playing it because you don't have to pay the mana cost.
It's when it says to put it into play that it dodges the stack.
Correct. Yeah, you're playing stuff. So you play a land because you don't have to pay mana to play a land, or you're playing something without paying its mana cost. It's just the broad term for it.
Yep.
Moving on.
So reveal is a card intended mostly for cards that search your library, because it's a way of built into the game for players to verify the card that you searched. So if you have to look for a land, you have to show your opponents that you found a land. Correct. Or if you have to look for a creature, you have to reveal that it was a creature. Yeah. The only exception, I believe, is some search cards in black. Most search cards in black, right?
That's if you can search for any card.
That say you could just find a card.
Yes.
Normally, it'll just say reveal that card and put it into your hand. Any
card that requires you to look for something specific also requires you to reveal it. It's a failsafe within the game to prove that you did in fact find the card that you said you were going to find.
Yep.
For example, with the Adventurous Impulse, it says you look at the top 3 cards of your library, you may reveal a creature or a land from among them and put it in your hand. This just ensures to your opponent that you are in fact grabbing either a land or a creature and putting it to your hand.
Yeah. Also, there are some permanents that have revealed as a state-based ability, and that means anything that is revealed remains revealed until that effect leaves play.
Correct.
So, like, telepathy is an enchantment that says players play with their hands revealed. So everyone gets to see everybody else's hands.
Yes.
Until telepathy leaves play.
And yes, exactly. So your hand would be revealed to every other player playing until the thing that's making you reveal it is gone.
As opposed to show, which is you pick whoever you want to show. But
yeah,
that's a different.
There are several different instances. Yes, several instances in which reveal takes place. It's basically you reveal it. You show them what you're doing. You show them what's going on.
Yeah,
more or less.
Yep.
Next up,
sacrifice.
Sacrifice is to move a permanent you control to its owner's graveyard.
Yep.
Sacrifice is one of those abilities that'll get around Indestructible because it's not being destroyed. You're sacrificing it. You're willingly taking it off the field. So like a good example of a card with sacrifice is Angrath's Rampage, where it says You choose one, target player sacrifices an artifact, a creature, or a planeswalker. So whichever one they choose, you have to see what's on your field. For example, if they choose target player sacrifices a creature. If I have 5 creatures, I get to pick which one I want off the field.
Yeah, the player controlling the permanent, they have to sacrifice. Generally, they choose what they sacrifice because sacrifice effects target the player as opposed to targeting the creature or permanent.
Yes. So, for example, with Angrath's Rampage, it's not targeting any creatures, but it's targeting the player. So, like, it'll go around Hexproof if a creature has Hexproof. However, if the player has Hexproof, well, now you can't target them to sacrifice something.
Because they can't be targeted.
But it will go around Hexproof. For example, if my only creature on the board has Hexproof and you're making me sacrifice a creature, well, too bad, so sad. The Hexproof guy has to go.
Yep. Sacrifice does not trigger destroy effects because the creature's not destroyed. It does, however, die, which basically just means it moves from the battlefield to the graveyard, and will trigger anything that says, like, whenever this creature dies.
Or whenever a non-token creature
dies or whatever.
Yep.
It basically just means whenever it moves from the battlefield to the graveyard. That's basically it.
Correct. Next up... Scry.
So, Scry is really interesting. It's usually a triggered ability or some kind of effect that goes on the stack. It allows you to manipulate the top X cards as whatever the number is attached to Scry. So Scry 1, you look at the top 1 card of your library. If it's Scry 3, you look at the top 3. And for each of those cards, you can choose to put it on the top or the bottom.
And you can choose to put them on the top in any
order among those 3 cards.
Or the bottom in any order.
Yeah. It does use a stack, and players can respond to it. So if you have like an effect that says draw a card, you can say, oh, cool, I'm just going to Scry 1, and do I want that card? No? Cool, I'll put it on the bottom and draw the next card.
Correct. It is predominantly found in, once again, the color most worth playing.
Almost entirely in blue.
It's almost entirely in blue. Yeah, it's just a really good way to fix your draw, more or less.
Yeah.
It's not, completely fail-safe, because obviously if you get to Scry 1, you're like, well, I really don't want to draw this land, so you put the land at the bottom. You can still draw a land, but at least you got rid of one of the lands.
Yeah.
And next up is Search. So Search is to look at all the cards in a stated zone and possibly find a card that matches a given description. The example we'll have here is Assassin's Trophy. It destroys target permanent an opponent controls, and its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and shuffle their library. So, if somebody Assassin's Trophy is one of my permanents, I get to look through my library as the specified zone, search for a basic land card, potentially find a basic land card. You can fail to find.
Yep. Searching does not guarantee that you will get.
Yes. The given description would be the basic land, so I can search my library, if I so choose, for that basic land card, and if I find it, in the case of Assassin's Trophy, I would get to put it onto the battlefield. But it basically just means you're searching for X and Y.
Yeah. Usually, search requires the player to reveal the card. Unless it doesn't specifically say reveal, then you don't have to show anybody anything.
Yeah, it usually, as we discussed with reveal, if you're searching for something specific, you will most likely have to reveal it. But this is just the search aspect of that. Next.
Shuffle. So, you shuffle your deck. It's a pretty universal term.
But more specifically, to shuffle means to randomize the cards in the deck.
It does mean to randomize the cards. The library is just the key, the word used for the deck you're using in a game. And I think anybody who's ever played a game of like cards with like just general playing cards understands what shuffling generally is.
Yeah.
Yep. Next.
Tap and untap. So when you're tapping or untapping, it means if you're tapping it, it means you're turning it sideways from an upright position, And then to untap is to rotate a permanent back to the upright position from the sideways position. So, for example, if you're attacking with a creature without vigilance, you tap it to a sideways position to indicate that you're tapping with it and it is exhausted. And then at the beginning of your turn during your untap phase, you get to untap all of the stuff that's exhausted.
Yep. Tapping and untapping occupies a weird space, and that can be both an ability or effect that goes on the stack, or it can be a cost. So if it's an effect that uses the stack and it can be responded to, but if it's a cost, then no one can really do anything about it because it's paying a cost.
Yes.
So then if anything triggers, but if anything cares about something being tapped, untapped, it still sees all of those things happen, regardless of whether it's a cost or not.
Correct. So just as an example, if you've got an activated ability that says you pay 3 mana and tap it to do said ability, the ability itself can be responded to, but tapping it is part of paying that cost, and you can't respond to that.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that is all of the Evergreen words.
That was a lot. It's really interesting. Breaking it down makes it feel like you're learning a language in a way.
Very much so.
Similar to programming.
Mm-hmm.
Or learning a language.
Or learning a language. These are the main functions of this game, the stuff that you'll see the most, especially with newer... The majority of new players start with standard legal stuff. Majority starts with standard legal stuff. So these are all the words and phrases that you're going to see in that standard, those standard legal things. So, for example, when you open up a fresh pack of cards as a new Magic player, you're like, flying, what does that mean? Now you know what flying means.
Yeah, they fly.
Thanks, Kenny. So
flap,
helpful.
flap, I'm a bird.
So helpful.
You can
Watch me fly.
You can lift them above the battlefield and go...
Yeah, no one can block it, because it's above those creatures.
Don't do that. Please don't do that.
Why did I bother? Anyways.
You can ride it to the next town.
That is this week's Fundamentals episode.
Yeah, so we do these every month for... Once a month for new players.
This one was totally an info dump.
This was definitely an info dump, but it's an important info dump.
If your brain hurts after watching this, I understand. My brain hurts.
I said my brain works, and I meant to say my brain hurts.
Well, I would hope your brain works.
My brain works.
Mine doesn't work.
We know, Kenny. That's okay. We love you anyways.
So what are we talking about next week?
So,
Commander.
Now that this is all wrapped up, next week we get to talk about my favorite format and potentially Kenny's favorite format.
I like all formats.
Fucking liar. We get to talk about my favorite format, Commander. This week, at the end of this week on Friday, will be the official release date for the new set Modern Horizons. So we are going to try our hand at building some more Commander decks using legendary creatures from Modern Horizons.
A lot of them are really cool.
Very cool.
I'm thinking probably 2 or 3 decks.
Yeah, we'll discuss the specifics of it later.
Probably, yeah.
We'll discuss, but know that next week you're going to get some pretty awesome Modern Horizon Commander deck decks from us.
I'm super excited. Like, I already have a brew in mind. So.
I already have one too. So this is going to be fun.
Right.
But thanks for joining us this week, guys.
Yeah,
thank you. This was Move to Combat. If you missed us, if you just got here, a bunch of people just got here. Where
were you all at for the last hour?
Don't yell at our audience. That's my job.
Be nice to him, Johnny.
All right. You can meet us here Wednesdays at 8 p.m. at Eastern Standard Time at Twitch TV/Move to Combat. If you missed this episode and you want to watch it on YouTube, we have all of our back episodes listed at Twitter at To Combat and our Facebook page, Move to Combat. You can also email us at movetocombatpodcast@gmail.com. We have a sister podcast on Saturdays at 6:30 if you're interested.
Keep going, James.
Keep going. We're just going to read this.
Okay, if you're interested in what does this have to do with anything?
Don't worry,
fine.
Just
keep going.
finish up. Come on.
We have a sister podcast on Saturdays called Brave Yet Stupid if you're interested in role-playing games, where we play role-playing games live on the air. If you liked our intro and outro music, you can find it at soundcloud.com/James Shive. That's James, Shaieb. That's me. And that's pretty much it. What are we reading?
Nothing. We're reading nothing. Thanks for joining us this week, guys. Have a nice night.
Thanks for joining us.
Have a good evening.
Have a nice evening. All right.